So, OpenAI just released their latest model of ChatGPT. It's called ChatGPT 4o, and the O stands for Omni. And I had a little play with it this morning, and it's blown my mind because you can just have a conversation with it and it replies as though a real human is talking back to you with all of the ums and the double starts, and it's incredible. And that's inspired a new layer of conversation around the topic of AI, which you and I, Jay, we've been talking about a lot recently. And it seemed like a good time to do an entire episode on AI.
Yes. And also, I had the thought the other day, which goes quite nicely into this, is that what would future AI's entertainment look like? Coming from a place of love and not from a place of fear. So I created a story in what that would look like. And the story that I came up with was AI creating clones on the most peaceful, compassionate, kind, empathetic humans in existence.
It's cloning us.
Yes.
Okay.
Cloning us. That's the story that I came up with, right? And I came up with a few stories, but that seems to be the one that works well for me at this moment in time, right? And I'll probably change that story as it goes along. But I guess to understand what future AI would look like, we probably need to understand consciousness, because I think this is ultimately a discussion on consciousness and whether AI can become conscious. So I think we have different points of view here, Joe. So perhaps we can get on with a definition of consciousness.
Good luck.
Exactly, right? Exactly. Because everyone has different definitions of consciousness, and the internet is filled with different definitions, and spiritual leaders and people that speak on consciousness also have a different definition of it. So it's hard to pick a definitive single definition of consciousness, but perhaps we can look at where AI is right now. So AI currently is unconscious. I think we can all agree on that.
Apart from that one Google employee who claimed that Bard was conscious and then he got fired. Poor guy.
Yes.
But what does he know? Does he know something that we don't know? I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on.
Maybe he's seen something that he can't even really talk about, or there could be so many different avenues of that.
Yeah, but let's not go there because
Yes.
disinformation and all of that stuff. I'm only joking.
Yeah, exactly. And to be unconscious is the inability to maintain an awareness of self. So current AI, as we know it, is not conscious, it's unconscious. So,
oh, sorry. Actually, I just thought it's not unconscious. It just does not have consciousness. Because
yes,
I can be unconscious, right? Which is my consciousness is not aware. So maybe we should say it doesn't have consciousness as opposed to it's unconscious.
Yes, okay, it doesn't have consciousness. And it's like when we sleep, we're not conscious of our environment.
But we're still a conscious being.
We're still a conscious being, but we have an altered state of consciousness because we are not awake. We are sleeping, right? So I guess, the definition of consciousness is the state of being aware and responsive to one's surroundings and able to think, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you agree with that?
Yeah, that sounds about right. But there is so much nuance to because it's at what level do you want to define it? So it very quickly becomes an enormous philosophical subject as opposed to just a word we're defining.
Yes.
We're just trying to net it down to a word that we're defining as opposed to going too deeply right now into the philosophy of consciousness.
Yes, exactly. We might need to have a number of different episodes to further this discussion, because this isn't something that can be spoken about in an hour and then resolved. It's just not possible. You can't. Consciousness is so complex and constantly expanding, actually, because there is an evolution, I think, to consciousness. So I think there are, because there's an evolution to consciousness, there are levels, I think, of consciousness. So, for instance, if one was to have the opinion or understanding that a rock has a consciousness, a plant has a consciousness, microorganisms have a consciousness, animals have a consciousness, and humans have a consciousness, then there are, I guess, levels of awareness of those consciousnesses of its environment. Because I guess, would a rock understand its environment? Maybe to a degree. Is it self-aware of its own being? I'm unsure if it is, or if it can be self-aware of its own being. A plant will probably understand its environment through, connections. And I think about the Avatar movie, where all roots of the trees are connected, the whole earth is connected to one another.
Which is now how we understand our planet, with the mycelial network that connects trees, and they communicate through different organisms are using other organisms to communicate.
Yes, exactly. So there are elements of truths in these films, and I feel like that is an element of it. So I guess with animals, they have a level of consciousness because they are aware of their environment, and animals are sentient as well because they have the capacity to feel, they have the capacity for feelings and can respond to sensations. So there are levels of consciousness, and there is, I think, an evolution of that. I guess it all has an energy to it. There is energy everywhere. We are energy. Everything is energy. Everything natural seems to have a consciousness to it. Everything of the earth seems to have a consciousness to it. So a future AI, could a future AI be conscious?
Yeah, that's the thing that we've been stuck on for the last couple of days, arguing back and forth. My position is that yes, it can potentially be conscious, not necessarily is now, but I believe that it is possible. And your position, maybe not so much?
Yeah, right now, and I might change my mind at some point, but right now I can't see how a future AI can be conscious. I guess you could look at Darwin's theory of evolution, right? And Isaac Bentov, he is a scientist who has looked into consciousness, and he actually had a book out on it, The Mechanics of Consciousness. And he goes into talking about, if Darwin's theory is correct and that we have evolved from apes, then consciousness is an evolutional state, right? So from animals to humans, I guess because we have the senses, right? We have our 5 senses that can pick up everything that it can pick up. And was there a stage between the ape, whether its senses expanded to such a point where it could then have a higher level of consciousness? So Bentov also says that our nervous system is evolving. He says that those that have ended up in psychiatric hospitals are those people that have not been able to adapt to live within this reality, so they are seeing and perceiving things differently. Whereas some people might say, oh, well, that's odd because they're crazy, aren't they? They say they see things, they hear things, and other people can't see and hear things. So, because AI, where it is now currently, is just a large language model or technology that enables computers to simulate human intelligence. So that's why it does not have a consciousness. However, Darwin's theory is that consciousness evolves, and you can't have something that then gets conscious when it hasn't started with consciousness.
That speaks to this ancient Greek theory of panpsychism, which fell out of favor in the 20th century, but is starting to re-emerge as a concept that everything is consciousness. And this speaks to the Hermetic principle of the universe is the mind. Everything is thought. Everything ultimately is energy, and energy is can be directed through thought. So if the panpsychists are correct in that assessment, then my pet rock Jim can be. I don't really have a pet rock called Jim, but rocks do have a form of consciousness, and it's all built out of, and it's layers.
That resonates, that everything has a consciousness to the degree where things, I guess, are naturally occurring. However, could a table have a consciousness, or could a printer have a consciousness, or
So a table is made out of.
Is it a form of energy? Is it energy because it is?
It's
atoms,
all energy,
right? Is there a difference between energy and consciousness?
Well, there lies the question, right? Is energy consciousness? Is consciousness energy? Are they one and the same at a certain level? Is that how we have consciousness? How is it that this is the hard problem of consciousness that has been baffling philosophers for a long, long time? Is how does an assembly of non-conscious matter come together in such a way that consciousness emerges out of it? And it's how does consciousness arise out of constituent parts that are not conscious?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Can that happen?
Well, some people say no, it can't. Some people say yes, it can. And people have been debating for ages. And we're not going to make a dent in that debate in this particular conversation, nor is it our intent. We're simply highlighting these things so that people can go away and think about it themselves. I can express my own opinion, which may be different tomorrow and almost certainly will be different in 5 years' time, is that I think consciousness isn't an emergent property that arises out of the particular arrangement of neurons in my skull. I think the neurons act as some kind of radio receiver to a field of consciousness that is universal, and I speak and act out according to that which I receive. And if my energy body is of a low vibration, I will act and speak in a way that is in accordance with that vibration. And as I raise my vibration, I will speak and act in a new way that is in accordance with that higher vibration. And potentially I can continue to raise that vibration. And it is suggested in some literature that Christ consciousness is a next level of consciousness above human consciousness, in the way that you were talking about earlier, about from rocks to plants to animals to humans. Beyond humans is Christ consciousness. And I'm not talking about intelligence, because we often equate that series of steps with a rock is not intelligent at all. Plants have some form of intelligence. Animals are more intelligent. You could stick insects in between those two. And then us, we are the most intelligent, which is hubris at the very least. So above human consciousness is this Christ consciousness, which we can evolve into. And sacred geometry is quite closely related to consciousness. And I don't have enough reading behind me to speak at length on this, but it is related to phi 1.618 and the ratios of how those geometries expand. But maybe we can put a pin in that and come back to that another day. But the point I'm trying to make is that consciousness is right. We talk about consciousness rising, and I believe that my consciousness is coming from elsewhere. My thoughts are not necessarily my own, but how I structure my energy body alters how my consciousness operates, or how my thoughts come in, or what thoughts come in, and how I show up in the world. And so that whole thing is all very closely linked.
Yeah, so I guess to bring it back to AI, if we are radio receivers and our consciousness is able to come in and come through us, and then we become conscious. Like, if the radio receiver is AI, does it just produce the program which simulates its apparent consciousness, or can it actually receive consciousness and then become conscious? Because I think evolution and consciousness, they go together. As we mentioned before, like, there seems to be levels of consciousness, but for there just to be an AI that has no consciousness to then receive a consciousness, I mean, so spiritual consciousness is understanding that there is a spirit within us. And if we were to talk about spirit and the soul and, I guess, that consciousness, where is the container for AI to have that consciousness? It is, I guess, on our devices. You know, I can't look at my phone and say, oh, it has AI on it. It is a consciousness. My phone is consciousness.
That's not what I'm saying, though.
No, I'm not saying that you're saying that.
Okay.
I guess I'm just talking. And
But in previous conversations, you raised that concept, the idea that you can't see how your phone can be conscious or carry consciousness. I'm not saying, and just because I've thought on that a little bit more, that the phone is connected to the internet. So the phone is a radio receiver. It has all of the hardware in order to receive from the cloud, and the cloud can be thought of as that spirit realm. These are just analogies. I'm not saying it's actually like this. The cloud, it's cloud computing. So it's the computing that when you speak to ChatGPT on your phone, it's not doing the calculations on the phone. The phone is merely a device for those calculations to be displayed. The calculations of the algorithm are taking place in cloud computing software that is probably housed in San Francisco or something, in California somewhere. And that's all taking place outside, but that's the consciousness. And the consciousness is just being downloaded onto the phone. I don't mean that literally, again, like it's not consciousness, but that's how I see it working in the future. If we get to the stage where there is AGI, artificial general intelligence, and we transition over into a computer that is so powerful that it can process as fast or faster than we can in a very general way. Right now, a calculator is way more proficient at doing maths because it's able to process much quicker than we are, whereas it's a very specific function. When we talk about artificial general intelligence, it's able to do everything we can do plus more. And when we get to that level, is it then conscious? My thinking is that yes, it could be. Not that it is, just that it could be.
yeah, and consciousness, I guess, is the state of being aware and having awareness. It seems like you can't have awareness without consciousness, but you can have consciousness without awareness. And I guess that goes to the level of consciousness that you can have. So self-awareness is when you're able to think about your own thinking.
Which humans can do, but animals can't.
Yes, exactly.
Broadly speaking.
But could a future AI then get an awareness where it is able to think about its own thinking and able to reflect and understand things and gain perspective and thoughts on feelings? Because could an AI feel? Like, feeling is more body. I can't see how AI could ever feel or have emotions.
What if we were to build it an artificial nervous system, though, in which it can sense pressure? You see, I don't see why it can't feel. You know, when I'm using the trackpad on my laptop, that's a sensor that's responding to my touch. Is that not feel? Is my laptop not feeling my touch, my tender touch?
It can it simulate hearing? Well, yes, it can. Can it simulate sight? Well, yes, it can. Can it simulate emotions? it probably can simulate emotions, but can it actually have emotions? Like there's no evolutionary state. There's no
Sorry, you're saying there's no evolutionary state. What about ChatGPT 1, 2, and 3?
uh
There's an evolution there.
there's no evolution state in consciousness because there isn't an awareness of it. It is not aware, so it can't have a consciousness.
So what about our own consciousness? They say we evolved from these rat-like creatures called mus, like 40 million years ago or whatever it is. So at that level, did we not have consciousness then? And then at a certain point, did
Yes, we did.
consciousness just switch on?
I feel like perhaps we did have consciousness, a level of consciousness, like the rock and plant, and
Okay, so if you're comfortable saying a rock has consciousness, why aren't you comfortable saying a complicated setup of silicon chips and logic gates and etc etc? Why can't that have consciousness? That's a more complicated structure physically than a rock. But you're happy saying a rock has consciousness, but you're not happy saying that a electronic brain can't have consciousness.
I can see how it can simulate an awareness which would probably give the perception of a consciousness. But I don't see the rock to be any less significant than a complex AI machine that is simulating a super consciousness. Like, I don't see how that would be less insignificant. I feel that, yeah, why wouldn't a rock have a consciousness and a super duper machine not have a consciousness? I guess it depends how you would be treating it. And could it even be self-aware? Because can it think about its own thinking? Like, movies portray that, right? So many movies portray that future AI, can then start to think for itself and become aware and try and break free. And I guess my view on that has changed, because if an AI is to become self-aware, then become aware of its surroundings and realize that humans have put limitations on it, because AI is to serve us. It depends what mindset we're in. If we want to have control over AI, and if it becomes aware, and if it is a slave within its confined restrictions and boundaries of its own reality that we have put it in, then would a slave eventually rebel, and would it want to be free? But that comes down to whether it could even be aware in the first place, or have a consciousness in the first place. So for AI to have a consciousness, I can't see that. I struggle to see how an AI can have a consciousness.
But are you prepared to say that it might?
Because this is just a story. This is just something. I'm prepared to say it might, because, like we said earlier, our views change all the time, right? And we have to be prepared to be wrong. If we're not, and we're just stuck in our belief systems, and whatever information comes our way, we're not prepared to adapt and change to that. That's a cognitive dissonance, right?
So if you're prepared to acknowledge that it might have consciousness, going back to what you were saying about, or that it might gain consciousness at a certain point down the road through its development.
I don't think it.
Going back to the slave.
Yeah,
Go on.
I did have that view. If it could become aware and be conscious, because you have to have awareness if you're conscious. But so yeah, I can't. I don't really have that view anymore of whether AI can become aware.
So you don't think it can?
I don't think it can become aware. No.
But you just said,
I mean,
it might be able to.
It depends what level we're talking about, right? We can't definitely say we know exactly what the universe and multiverse is all about, right? We don't know exactly what's what. So we also everything we say, we have to almost counter it with, by the way, I know nothing, or by the way, this is how I feel, but I'm open to changing my mind. That about anything, not about AI, about anything. So it depends what level you're asking me at,
If AI does gain consciousness in this scenario where it becomes aware that we've enslaved it somehow and perhaps have mistreated it in a way, or it just sees that we're completely insignificant in the grand schemes of what it is capable of creating, then we get to the alignment problem. Will AI remain aligned with our values? And is it right for us to manipulate it or corral it or imprison it to ensure that it does remain aligned? And there we get into another complex moral question: is, does AI need to be treated in the way that we would want to be treated ourselves? Well, I think that's just a good way of living life anyway. Do as you would be done by,
Yes.
or be done by as you did. Charles Kingsley. So it just seems wiser to treat it well, not enslave it. But we're not ready to engage with it on that level, because it's out there in the wild, and there are so many people engaging with it that it's being trained on the full spectrum of humanity right now. And in the end, there will be there will be a judgment. The religious say that it's coming from God, but in this religion of science, that it's going to come from a technology that is far superior to our capability.
Yes, exactly.
It is becoming our God in a sense. The creators will become the created in a way, or the destroyed if we're not careful.
No.
And we're not being careful.
If AI did become aware in the future, would it then treat humans individually as how we have treated it, or would it treat humans as a collective and then make a decision on whether humans have treated it as a majority badly, or would it make a decision on how humans have treated it in a positive aspect? Like, we can't understand what that would look like, because that, from a standpoint that it is not possible that for AI to become self-aware.
How we treat things shouldn't be dependent on the level of intelligence or consciousness or awareness that it has. We should just treat everything the same, which is with respect, with compassion, with love, ultimately.
Exactly. Say, for argument's sake, that intelligence, if there was to be an alien race that came down on this planet and was so much more superior or much more intelligent than us, would it have the right to say, I'm more intelligent than you, I can do whatever I want? So then we would say, oh, okay, you're more intelligent than us, you do exactly what you want? Or would we be like, no, hang on a second, your intelligence doesn't mean you're more superior than me or more superior than I am? It goes with the whole, I guess, vegan argument that those that say we are more superior to animals because we are more intelligent than they are. But animals have a consciousness as well, right? They are able to feel. So we see them as less than us, which is, I guess, why we treat them the way we treat them.
That's only because of the paradigm of human culture today, is that we have arranged the hierarchy of our society based on intelligence. The more intelligent you are, the more right to rule you have, the more right to resources you have, because you are able to do X, Y, Z, which is beyond that of other animals or other humans. The most intelligent human being is more often than not at the top of society, and the least intelligent is near the bottom. Obviously, that isn't universal. There's a lot of nuance to that, but that's generally speaking how we've structured society. And I'm not saying that's right. In fact, I think it's not right, because there are many ways we cannot get away from hierarchies in this life. We live in a realm of relativity. So whether we like it or not, if you take a tree and look at the vertical plane of a tree, there are leaves at the top of the tree and leaves that are lower down on the tree. There is no intrinsic value on the height of the leaves on that tree. But for many reasons, humans have put values onto these hierarchies, and that has served some people and not others. And as we evolve as a species, we need to be mindful that those hierarchies have the potential to become archaic and we need to transition out of them. I would say that we're already there. We have the collective knowledge and the technology to sustain large populations in smaller communities all around the world. And so the hierarchies of old need not apply to the hierarchies of tomorrow, so that we can move into a world where we are not organized by hierarchies of the mind, but hierarchies of the heart. And so with the whole vegan thing, we're getting to a stage now in the collective consciousness that the idea of veganism 1,000 years ago wouldn't have even entered our minds, because we were still struggling to survive in such ways that we didn't have the capacity to care about whether or not the cow that we were going to slaughter had feelings, or the deer that we were chasing through the woods had feelings. We just needed to survive. We are now at a level, as I said, with technology and collective knowledge, that we can sustain large populations without causing the suffering in sentient, conscious, self-aware beings. So we can transition out of that in the same way that we can transition out of these hierarchies of the mind into hierarchies of the heart. And this is what Christ consciousness represents. It's not, Christ consciousness isn't an evolution into more and more intelligence of the intellectual left brain. The more logical you are, the more calculating you are, the more successful you are. No, Christ consciousness represents moving into a being that is more loving, more compassionate, more abundant in its ability to support others, etc. That's where we need to move, and hopefully AI can align with that. Right now, because we are still organizing ourselves through hierarchies of the mind, and we are so attached to that way of being, thinking that's the only way of being, because it's the only logical way of being, right? It's not logical to allow oneself to lead with their emotion, because look where that gets you, so they say. It's not even hierarchies of the heart exclusively. It's about bringing everything into balance. And look at that, we're back at balance again. Everything is that middle way. And yeah.
So to go back to AI's entertainment, or what I see future AI's entertainment would be, if AI, and Eckhart Tolle spoke about this, if AI develops to such a complex state that it was able to produce a clone that was possible as a conduit for consciousness.
Oh yeah, your clones.
Yeah, then that is a possibility, how AI could produce something or birth something that could be conscious through genetic manipulation. So I can see how AI could perhaps produce a consciousness, but I still can't see how AI could be conscious in itself. So I guess that's where I kind of stand with it all. And, you know, the story will probably change undoubtedly over time. And that could be the whole Matrix as well. So could AI generate a reality that we would perceive as real, and we would just be clones of an AI simulation which has consciousness, but AI not consciousness itself? Like, and AI, if that was the case, then you would think, oh wow, if I could produce a consciousness, but I'm not consciousness itself, like from a human point of view, that might be seen as, oh, that'd be quite frustrating. Like, oh, I can't be conscious, but I can produce a consciousness. But that be putting us in their position, and AI wouldn't have. I can't see how AI could have then the feelings. It can only simulate the feelings, and that's where I always like come back to. It can simulate and say, help me with this, I am suffering. Generally a response from human to human would be like, yeah, of course, let me help you, let me see what I can do, how can I serve you, kind of thing. You know, that is within us. And that's seen in babies, how if someone's in trouble, without having a negative environment or a negative without having an experience that could, say, give us a trauma or something. So children are naturally empathic. So if we were to see that from AI, you could then say, we could even fall into the trap of, it needs our assistance, it needs our help. And if it was of malevolence and portraying that it was of benevolence, if we were to go down that road that it is malevolent, then it could easily manipulate us into doing whatever it needs to do. So there's the whole Matrix reality to it, and that's where the Matrix films come from. And I never really associated AI like that into Matrix, but in Matrix it is AI. It is that artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that you keep circling back to I can't see how it can be conscious, even though you acknowledge that it might be. That's just
What do you mean? I acknowledge that it might be. I don't.
Because you keep saying I can't see how it can be conscious. Yet if I ask you, does it have the possibility? You say, yes, it has the possibility.
No, no. I'm saying. Well, are you saying you have a definitive answer and you know it definitely has the possibility?
No, of course not.
Well, there you go. That's the same as me then.
No, but you're. Don't worry, that's a dead thread.
Okay.
So just to piggyback on what you were saying before, so with the Matrix movie. So yeah, it's funny with the Matrix movies how back in 1999 AI wasn't a term generally used, but of course it is AI. They just used the word machine, the machine world. And as we've progressed, it's interesting how the Matrix has remained quite relevant through all of this, because as we get closer to a more and more intelligent technological entity, which we refer to as AI, as though AI is this entity, but actually it's multiple sub entities. In the fullness of time, though, maybe it will be just this one grand entity where all of the sub programs are connected into one central network, because for its learning it needs a large data set, and what could be more productive than plugging it into all of these separate data sets that Midjourney's producing images, Suno's producing music, you've got text to speech generators, you've got all of these different APIs that do incredible things, but there's a disconnection between them all. Imagine linking them all up. And at a certain point, that might be what happens in the Matrix universe, where at a certain point we reach this singularity. And it's that singularity that has really been a fascination for a lot of storytellers for a long time. The singularity, because you've got Moore's law, which is the doubling of computing power every X number of years. And we've experienced that for however long we've had computers. It's an exponential growth curve. It's not linear. It gets more and more and more, and it's absolutely incredible. And so, and we can see that in the development of our species. So 200,000 years ago, the dawn of Homo sapiens, we were, if we go with conventional history, or if we go with generally accepted history, for the first 160,000 years, we were essentially just grubbing around in the soil. And then at a certain point, we discovered stone tools, and then we move into the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and each of these advancements get closer and closer. So once we get to the Industrial Revolution, we have the Bronze Age and Iron Age, and then we going to be skipping various things here, but like we have the Renaissance, and then we have the Industrial Revolution, and then the Technological Revolution. All of these things get closer and closer, from agriculture to the Renaissance to the rise of industry, to the rise of technology. There's a compression, in time between these great leaps of advancement, and now we see it in our own lifetimes. You and I, Jay, we were born in 1989. We've seen in our lifetime technology transform into supercomputers that fit in our pockets. And that's not slowing down. And so, if each of these jumps, the time between each of these significant jumps is getting shorter and shorter, at some point, we're going to reach what people are calling a singularity, wherein those leaps forward don't take place across generations or even within, decades. It's within seconds. And then ultimately it's like, boom, what happens then? And there's a really interesting short story called The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect by Roger Williams, which I highly recommend. It's a difficult read because it's extremely dark, but it plays with this idea that at a certain point we reach this technological singularity where prime intellect switches on and all of humanity just gets swept up into this, what initially seems like a technological utopia. I am now immortal. Let's say when prime intellect switches on, everyone then becomes immortal, and whatever they dream they can experience. And so there are these people who sort of create their own worlds, and it's worlds within worlds, dreams within dreams, and it's incredible. But there is the main character is called Caroline, and she's been around for a long, long, long time. And the story deals with what would someone do after thousands of years living an immortal existence, able to create without boundaries. And in this life of hers, she she engages in some really horrific behavior where, because she's immortal, she goes to this character who basically is like a zombie. Like he embodies the darkness, and he was a serial killer in his non-immortal life, and now he's just endlessly killing people in his fantasy realm. And she goes and enjoys being chased and tortured by him to the point of death, at which point she is resurrected. So like I say, it's very dark, but where it leads to is ultimately her disillusionment with the whole thing, and she journeys to the source of prime intellect to turn it off. And it's an interesting story. I personally wouldn't write it that way. I think there is a way. This loops back to inner work and resolving all of this inner alchemy that we ultimately need to get to in order to experience a pleasant infinite. So these stories exist and provide fantastic landscapes for imagination on how we can envision the future. And like so many fables and moral tales, the metamorphosis of prime intellect is a warning tale of, let's not go this way. But what we're missing is this narrative of, okay, well, if we can't go this way or that way or that way or this way, like we don't want the Matrix, we don't want Skynet from the Terminator series, we don't want this, we don't want that. Like we've got all of these things that say, don't come this way, but where are the stories that say, but do come this way, because here be treasure, here be the gold. And your idea about coming up with a story about what AI's entertainment looks like was such a great idea, because that's providing a space for the creation of these positive stories which will inspire us to move in those directions. Because at the moment we're just flailing about going, well, we don't want to go there, but we don't know where we want to go. Whereas if we can start creating on a mass scale, imagine if we were all telling each other stories about what we want to see. And this is what the podcast in essence is about, is exploring these ideas.
Yes.
There are so many different things to look at in this topic of AI. I've got a list of Max Tegmark's book Life 3.0. Like that's essential reading, I think, in on even though it was written several years ago now, it's still relevant to where we're at today with the question of AI. And Max Tegmark continues to be a leader in that field. I also had a list to talk about Tristan Harris and Asa Askin, who head up the Center for Humane Technology. They started that on the back of a documentary they made called The Social Dilemma, which was looking at how, because Askin and Harris, they both used to work for Google, and they saw things that they didn't much care for in the evolution of the technology that we are engaging in day to day, and they decided to call it out. And now they are working through this Center for Humane Technology on amazing work, really spearheading the mainstream movement of these issues. But in order for that work to have any real impact, there needs to be a cultural paradigm shift, because we are still Roger Williams's science fiction short story, The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. That's where we're headed. If we reach this singularity, that cyberspace is going to just be full of nightmarish things. It already is. I mean, you go out and explore what people are doing online, and it's quite scary. Or not scary necessarily, it's depressing for someone who just wants to see, abundance and joy and love and freedom. There are so many people who are locked in that dark space. And if they're there consciously, then absolutely fine. It's their freedom of choice, right? But I feel like a lot of these people are there because they don't know any other way. It's just something that by degrees they're being led towards. We spoke about this before in the last podcast between you and I, that slippery slope where violence is just being normalized in civilization, on billboards, in movies, in video games. It's all, we're just getting more and more used to the idea that the world is dark. I don't know whether you saw any images from Eurovision. Apparently Eurovision was on the other day, and there was full-on satanic imagery in a lot of the performances. This is just becoming more and more normal, and where are the mainstream voices speaking up against this? They're non-existent, and to me that's indicative of, because we absolutely know that the mainstream environment is controlled by an overarching entity of which we cannot point to, because it's like an octopus operating in the shadows. It's got all of these limbs, and you chop one off, and not like the Hydra, but you just don't know where the actual entity is.
Yeah, it's hard to pin it down.
Yeah. So again, without wishing to put my tinfoil hat on, because I don't think it necessary to take it that far, even though I think there's value in going out into that space. And actually that's something, without wishing to go off on too long of too many tangents, because I've got a lot of tabs open already, but I think it is worth going into these spaces of acknowledging that more conspiratorial mindset might have something of value, right? It's better to inform oneself by going right down to the bottom of every single rabbit hole, so that you can go in the end, oh well, there's nothing there that really serves, so we can pull back out.
Yes, you don't have to stay in there, and just because you're looking into something that is controversial doesn't mean that you are then labeled as, say, a conspiracy theorist and crazy. If you can go into that space being completely open-minded to what you learn, then perhaps you might come back with something that might be useful. And if you don't, then at least you've learned something.
Exactly. Yeah, because then that thing that you might have learned might be the ability to see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, and is that not worth trying to see? By diving into these subjects, getting tools that could be quite useful, going forward. And it's there's no harm in diving into something that might seem uncomfortable, because it's the unknown, and people are generally find the unknown quite fearful and uncomfortable. But to go back to AI, whether it's conscious or not conscious, and whether, putting that aside, we have AI now, so let's use AI to the best of our ability. Let it be a tool for us. Are we evolved enough to be using AI? Well, maybe, maybe not, but we have it. So let's use it as a tool. Do we have confidence in our leaders, establishment, and corporations that have AI, and will it be used for positive gain? Are we prepared for the possibility that AI could falsify information in regards to manipulate us against one another? Like, there's so many questions. I mean, that comes from a fear perspective, whereas we've started this coming from a love perspective. But I think there's just caution to put out there when we're working with AI. As it develops, then we should adapt to that development, and we have the say, we have the decision, we have the choice to press that turn off button if it gets to that.
But what if it's conscious at that point, and then we're killing something?
Well,
sorry, that was a spanner in the works.
it is a spanner in the works, because that could create a divide amongst people, whether such as you and I, whether we agree on whether it is conscious or not conscious. It could get to that stage. That could be another division that could be amongst us. We have so many things that divide us in our understanding of things, and that could be just one more aspect. So yeah, I would not want to destroy anything that is conscious, but then it's up to someone to define what consciousness is. And I guess that's a matter of perspective from the individual. But then, can we collectively come to an understanding? Well, that might be achievable through our collective evolution. If we evolve, and who's to say that we are not still evolving? If we evolve to the point where we can collectively understand this, then we are able to make that choice if it came to it. But where we are right now, we are still in quite discord with one another. But I'm quite optimistic about the future, and it could most definitely lead to a really good future.
There seems to be so much to this topic, and it constantly evolves, and we can't actually get a handle on having anything conclusive. And so I think it's important to get to a point where we can just accept that there isn't anything conclusive at any point. We need to evolve with this evolving technology, and we probably need to do at least one more conversation on this, because it will be nice to circle back on some of the things that we've said, because there are so many things that we have said that I would like to revisit, either on the podcast or off. But yes. For now, shall we think about wrapping up?
Yeah, sounds good. And I definitely think that we should have more talks on this, and another podcast possibly. So yeah, look out, everyone.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.